And right now, about 60% of you are going, oh no. This can only get better. But last night, I heard that Mandy rocks. So I thought we had to rock a little. And Surfing USA, wherever we are in the world, we ride the waves and fight the energy of the waves. And I live at Manly Beach, and I'd like to share with you a little story about surfing in a retail environment. And even though I know you're in a totally different selling market to traditional retail, I think you'll see how this relates to you at Mannatech as well. Because anyone from Manly, by the way? Manly, New South Wales? Okay, when I first moved to Manly, I wanted to get involved in the local community. So what's the first thing you need if you want to swim in the ocean in the middle of winter? A wetsuit. Someone a few weeks back said, a psychiatrist. But I thought a wetsuit. So I see this sign, wetsuits for sale. In I walk. Typical surfer dude in there, ponytail, tattoo, earring, typical surfer dude. So it's Gen Y meets baby boomer. And you know what it's like in traditional retail environments? When you sometimes want help, you get ignored. And when you don't, they're all over you like a bad rash. I was being ignored this day. And I said, excuse me, I'm interested in wetsuits. So he walks over and goes, is it for your daughter? This is called building customer rapport. I said, no, it's for me. He says, there they are. Mr. Cool walks away. Miss walks out. I walk into another shop, the same product, the same layout, the same stereotype-looking guy with the blonde ponytail, tattoo, earring. But this young dude knew his product. He explained to me the difference between 3 millimeters, 5 millimeters steamers. There's technical stuff in surfing, not as technical as there are in your products at Mannatech, but there's still lots of technical stuff. He gave me one to try on. I squeezed into it, and I came out of the fitting room and I said, how's this? And he didn't burst into fits of laughter, which I really appreciated. And I said, great, I'll take it, because I'm the only woman I know missing the shopping gene. I see it, I buy it, I am out of there. But this, you want to marry me, right? I've had a few offers. Your wife's holding on to him. I'm the only woman I know missing the shopping gene. So anyway, I thought, oh well. So anyway, I came out and he starts engaging in dialogue with me. And he says, if you're not used to swimming in the ocean, you're probably interested in safety as well as warmth. I said, yes. He said, we've got a special on at the moment on high-performance carbon flippers that give you more power through the surf. I wouldn't have known a high-performance carbon flipper from a flipper, but safe, you bet. Anyway, I said, okay, I better take them. He said, you don't want to lose them, do you? I said, not if I've just bought them. He said, we've got these little Velcro things that we stick around your ankle. Those of you in sales, what's this called? Upselling, and you do it with your products as well. He was a genius at it. I said, great, I'll take it. So I'm coming out, he says, you know what? You look like a really fun lady. How about a boogie board? I went, mate, this upselling's gone a bit too far. But guess who now owns an orange and purple boogie board? It works. I just went in to get the one item. I came out with 4, having paid a small fortune. I give him my credit card. I said, so what else does a middle-aged surfy chick need? And he winks at me and he goes, a middle-aged surfy bloke. And then I met George last night. And he's from Canada too, And I said, great, I'm single, I'll take one of those too. I said, if you've got one that comes with the stability of the boot, the high performance of those carbon flippers, and the money-back guarantee of the wetsuit, I'll take one of those middle-aged surfy blokes. And this young kid, young enough to be my son, says, sorry, but we're out of stock on that model. But when it came time to upgrade from my boogie board to my surfboard, which shop did I go to, the first or the second? What was different at the second shop? Service, attitude towards service. And I put to you, it's that attitude towards service that will have your customers boomerang and come back to you. It's that attitude towards service that will help you ride the waves of change into your future beyond all limits possible. I'll just get rid of this. And you've probably gathered that wasn't born on this side of the ocean. And also in terms of things have changed a lot since I first arrived in Australia, since most of you were born in Australia or New Zealand. But every day we can surf the waves in opportunities in times of change. This is a new surfboard out with a computer built into the surfboard. Personally, it's one that I never want to have. When I'm out there riding the waves, I want to just chill. And surfing is very, very much about going beyond all limits. And as you know, I don't sound Australian, but I'm actually dinky-die Aussie. I've got an emu and a roo on my passport to prove it. I just talk funny. It's a speech impediment called a Canadian accent. But I've lived in Australia most of my life, and I'm very proud to have that emu and kangaroo on my passport. And do you know why they're on our passports? Because they're the only critters that can't walk backwards. Absolutely right. And I think all of our futures, we've got to be looking forwards into the future. But I'm sure there's times that we all do look backwards. Sometimes we look backwards with pride. Sometimes we look backwards with sadness. And one of the things I learned a long time ago, that sometimes we can drive change, but sometimes we can't change any more than we can turn back the tide. And we have to learn what we can do and what we can't do in terms of our limits. And many years ago, congratulations, by the way, to all of the winners last night and all the presidentials and all the people that are going to be winners in the future. But people often ask me why it is that I came to Australia. And I used to just brush it off. But when I won the Telstra-sponsored Australian Executive Woman of the Year award, journalists started asking me questions that I never even answered to close friends. They said, well, how is it that a Canadian won the Australian Executive Woman of the Year award? How did you come to be in Australia? And my life was going pretty much the way I wanted to. I grew up on the wrong side of the tracks in Calgary, Alberta, in Canada. It wasn't exactly the end of the earth, but you could see it from there. And but I knew that I wanted to be a teacher as long as I could remember, because a teacher was or a nurse for the highest socioeconomic roles that a girl could aspire to in my generation. And I think nurses are wonderful, but I don't do blood and guts and bodily fluids. So it was a teacher. So I started working when I was 13 years old, because I knew I had to work and earn money to go to university to get out of that neighborhood. And I had many, many jobs, and I got scholarships, and I got student loans, and I was that reckless wave into my future, even though I grew up in the prairies, when I got dumped big time. Because the year that I graduated from university, both my parents died of cancer. And I was an only child. I felt very vulnerable, very alone. I just felt like there was this huge wave that was just holding me under, and I just thought, hadn't expected it at all. It just came from absolutely out of nowhere. So I came to, even my best friend was on the other side of the ocean teaching in Melbourne. And I got to tell you that I really felt that I needed a best friend. So I came to his backpack and $200 for a 3-month working holiday. And I've stayed over 30 years. I never speak on time management. But the biggest problem of my life turned into the biggest opportunity of my life. And I had the good fortune of boarding with an elderly couple in Melbourne, Frank and Betty Jansen. And Frank Jansen was a real awkward sort of guy, and he says, Kath, you're having a bad trot. I'd never heard the word. He said, but he told me 9 little words that I've never forgot. He said, Kath, every day above the ground is a good one. And I would like to probably modify that. Every day above the ground in good health is an even better one. And those 9 little words helped me looking forward into my future rather than looking back. Because I went through a stage of going, oh, this isn't fair. Why does this have to happen to me? Yeah, but we all sometimes go through that. But I don't know about you folks with all your supplements, whether you've got unlimited energy. But I've got limited energy, and I needed to use every amount of energy I had not to look at the past, but to be in the present and move towards my future. And as I said, Australia has given me more opportunities than I ever could have dreamed about. But when I arrived in Australia, I was really shy. I wouldn't say boo to a frog. My self-esteem was probably at an all-time record low. And I don't know, has anyone else had low self-esteem at some stage in your life? I think we all. But one of my favorite quotes, I've kept a diary every night since I was 16, and one of my favorite quotes was by Eleanor Roosevelt. that no one can make you feel inferior without your consent. This is a photo I took in Africa, and I love the scar on that lioness's nose, because we all get scars through our life, but we still have to sit proud and look towards our future. And you know, when I came to Australia, one of the sayings I heard was, shift happens. Now, we don't always use the F, do we, in Australia? But shift happens in our personal lives, shift happens in Mother Nature, shift happens in human nature. And I had to shift my thinking of how I looked at myself, because I had limiting beliefs. And I had limited energy, and I had to shift my way of thinking and look at things just a little bit different, because my dream wasn't over. My dream had taken a detour. And never in a million years would I have believed I'd have the honor of sitting with you here at Mannatech today. Never would have dreamed I would have had the honor of writing a number of best-selling books. But I was limited initially. I probably wasted a year feeling sorry for myself. Don't be limited. Don't waste any time going beyond your limits. And I've seen so many changes in Australia in the time I've been here. And haven't there been changes in the way it's perceptions and reality? Haven't there been changes in the way people perceive your business? You know, and I think your business is a fantastic, fast-growing business. But also, haven't there been changes in the way we look at service in Australia? Because do you agree with, used to think that service jobs were jobs you got until you got a real job? We used to think maybe service was beneath our dignity. But if you look at the dictionary definition, there's two definitions of the word service. One is the attendance of an inferior upon a superior. And that implies that subservience, that Australians and New Zealanders and Singaporeans, we don't want to be subservient to anyone. But the second definition of service is to be useful. Isn't that a great definition? Isn't that what all of you are at Mannatech? You're useful in terms of helping people with their health and with the supplements. And some of you are going on, what's she going on about dictionaries and definitions for? Well, I'd like to share with you, when I first came to Australia, how the definition of a little word made a difference to my career. Because I was originally a phys ed teacher at Broadmeadows High in Melbourne. Now, who else from Melbourne? Yay! How would you describe Broadmeadows in one word as a suburb? Rough. Okay, it was considered the roughest suburb in Australia, but that didn't worry me, because I grew up in that sort of suburb in Canada, the wrong side of the tracks. It doesn't matter if you grow up on the wrong side of the tracks. It only matters if you are on the right track today. And when I was 13 years old, we used to have a principal that used to stand up at assembly and go, "You kids are nothing, because your parents are nothing, or you wouldn't live in this neighborhood." What a jerk. This guy had had a personality bypass. But when 13 years old, you wonder if the stuff adults tell you is true. You have these limiting beliefs. And we went home that night to a girlfriend's home, and we said, "Is it true we'll never be anything because we live in this neighborhood?" And her mother, Mrs. Muriel Allen, a Scottish lady, she says, "Classies, it's not where you live, it's how you live." I'm sorry I don't do a very good Scottish accent. But I've never forgotten that. It's not where you live, it's how you live. So when I got posted to Broadmeadows High, which was considered the roughest suburb in Australia, I knew there were going to be some great people out there. But I arrived in the middle of grand final season of Australian rules football. And I know everybody in Melbourne, I know we're talking about World Cup at the moment, and Queenslanders and New South Wales people are into rugby league, and I do follow the Seagulls, sorry. And you live in Manly, you don't have a choice. But in Melbourne, everybody's crazy about Australian rules football. And I knew nothing about the game. I'd only been in the country a couple of weeks. So here I am at the roughest school in Australia, and what's the only thing the kids want to know about their new phys ed teacher? Who do you barrack for? Who do you go for? Who do you barrack for? I'd never heard the definition of the word barrack, but I figured out it meant who do you cheer for? And at that stage, Richmond was on top of the ladder, so I thought, okay, I'll go with the Strains. I subsequently switched to the Swans because their colors were the same as, only because they were the same as Canada's, no other reason. But where I come from in Canada, and George would testify to this, so would Sam, or anyone from the United States, I'd never heard the word barrack before, so we root for a team. Okay, so it's not a rude word, so if I offend or embarrass anyone, I apologize. But imagine, here I am at the roughest school in Australia, and the kids are going, "Who do you barrack for, miss?" I said with some degree of certainty, "I root for Richmond." Little 14-year-old boy went, all of them, miss? And I thought these Australian kids were weird. Like, how can you just cheer for part of a team? So I said, of course, the whole team. I gave them a lecture on teamwork and working together and the sort of thing you speak to your teams about as well. They went, the reserves too? And I went, well, why not? The people behind the scenes are just as important. It's not just the people that kick the goals. Do you ever do that? You dig yourself a hole and you just keep digging deeper. And in all innocence, I'd no idea what I'd said until the next morning the phone is ringing with angry mothers questioning my morality. And rightly so. And I've got to tell you that I changed my definition of that word like that. What was in it for me to change? One, my job, and two, my self-esteem. So why do I share this story in relation to Mannatech? Because I firmly believe exactly the same thing is in it for all of us in Australia, New Zealand, and Singapore today to change our definition of service from subservience to being useful. Our jobs are in it, our self-esteem is in it. We've got to constantly look at moving forward. Now, being an ex-phys ed teacher, I like to use a lot of sporting analogies. I like to think of the customer as a bit like a baton. Imagine you're a member of the Olympic team. You're in the stadium. You're wearing your country's colors. The gun goes. You've got two jobs. One, you've got to run like blazes and add value with every step you take when you're carrying that baton. But as a member of an Olympic relay team, you've got another responsibility. You need to understand the strengths and speed and weakness of who you're passing that baton onto and practice that smooth transfer. Because you can have record-breaking performances in one part of your team, your downline. You drop the baton, what happens? It takes time to get those processes right, but it takes a whole lot longer to stoop down and pick it up. And it doesn't matter if there's 4 people on an Olympic team, 35 people in head office, or 350,000 on your team of associates. It's important that everyone understands the important role they play in passing the baton and passing it along. And after being a phys ed teacher, I worked as a chambermaid up in the Gold Coast. I worked as a waitress on the coast. I worked in a mine up in Weipa. I did a number of different things until I then worked for the Life Be In It campaign. So I really do share your commitment to wellness because we were involved in starting the Life Be In It campaign when everyone thought it was impossible to market sport, to market fitness. After Life Be In It, I ended up working for IBM in sales. And I'd never sold anything in my life except brownie cookies. And as soon as a neighbor said, no, we don't want any cookies, thanks, dear, I'd burst into tears, go home, and my mom would buy the whole pack and we'd eat them for 6 months. So I never done anything in sales until I joined IBM. And I didn't really often see myself as a salesperson. I saw myself as a solutions person. I never sell people something, give them the hard sell. I wanted to just make sure I came up with solutions for them. I ended up being one of the top sales reps in Australia. And then I got promoted up to Japan working for IBM. And I was very, very proud to work for IBM because they were considered the most respected company in the world, written up in Search of Excellence, Harvard Business Review. And in Japan, you know, the word customer literally translates into honored guest in one's home. Isn't that a great way of thinking it? Honored guest in one's home. And sometimes we think of the customer as a pest, not a guest. And in Japan, I just lived and breathed customer service. And I was very proud for IBM, but many of you would know what happened to IBM in the late 80s. Their shares fell, they lost money, they lost revenue because we lost the plot. We became a bit fat, dumb, and happy and arrogant about our customers and started telling them what we thought they needed, and we stopped listening to what they were telling us they wanted. We didn't think there was a market for a little thing called a laptop. And I really urge you, in terms of Mannatech, you're one of the leaders in the field. You're one of the leaders in glyconutrition. You've got so many patents out there. Be proud of your success. Be proud of your current position. But never let your success in the past get in the way of your success in the future, because it only matters if you're kicking goals this year. It doesn't matter if you won the grand final last year. And in Japan, trains, for example, they were spotlessly clean. You could ride them in complete safety day or night. The only thing I didn't like about the trains in Tokyo was everyone got on the same one I did every morning, which is not a great way to start the day with someone nestled in your armpit. And there's 20 million people in Tokyo, more than the entire population of Australia, and I swear they all got on my train. And to make matters worse, they've got little guys with white gloves called shovers who gently push you into the compartment. How many have seen that or been there? Yeah. And one morning I was the last person in and the doors were closing, and I turned to him in my best Japanese. I said, "Excuse me, sir, would you mind moving your hands?" He went, "Certainly, madam, if you insist." That's what the customer wants, that's what the customer gets. Now, it's politically incorrect, I know, but you'll never be able to get on a train again without thinking of today and thinking of this story and thinking that customer translates into honored guest in one's home. And one of the things, IBM gave me many, many wonderful opportunities. And one of the things in terms of selling that I learned is that we've got to look to the future in terms of pushing limits. We don't throw out the baby with the bathwater, but we look to the future. Because the 7 most expensive words in any organization are, "We have always done it that way." Now, I'm sure you never hear that around Mannatech, but I hear that in lots of organizations around the world. And it's really important that you listen and you learn. And it's great coming to these conferences. You're going to learn from people on stage. I'm not going to tell you how to run your business because all the presidentials and people like that know way more than I do. But listen and learn from absolutely everyone and put it into practice. Because too often people in sales, they talk more than they listen. And rather than close a sale, we've got to look at opening a relationship and opening a long-term relationship. Because I call it the wombat theory. And to me, WOMBAT stands for word of mouth, best advertising. I think it's great that you build your brand with a national and an international presence. I think it's wonderful that Mannatech's been in Australia over 13 years, internationally over 20 years, but always look to improve. Always, and that's why you've invested your time to come to this conference, because leaders listen, leaders learn, and leaders act on what they've learned. And probably the best example of listening relates to my goddaughter. And she lives in Cootamundra in the Riverina. Anyone from Cootamundra? You might even know them. And her father is a sheep farmer and her mother is a feminist. And it was kind of an interesting combination. And one day Sarah was in the backyard playing and a country bloke came and says, "G'day, you must be Bernard White's daughter." And Sarah went, "Yep." Her feminist mother overheard this, took her aside, sat her down, said, "You're not just Daddy's daughter. You're your own little person with your own goals and values and identity." She was 4 at the time. Said, "Do you understand?" And Sarah went, "Yep." A few days later, they're pushing a trolley along in the supermarket, and a country bloke comes by again and says, "G'day, you must be Bernard White's daughter." And Sarah looks up and goes, "Well, Mummy says I'm not." Kids say the most amazing things. But didn't Sarah partially listen? Didn't Sarah partially listen? And I think it's really important that we totally listen, we learn, and we then act on what we do in terms of learning. Because, and constantly improving ourselves to go beyond all limits. Now, when I was speaking to Betty a few weeks ago, she said they're the most fantastic group of people. They're just a great group of individuals. They're fantastic. But the question I'd really ask is not how good, I have no reason to doubt her. I'm sure that's absolutely true. But the real question I'd ask is not how good you are, but are you good enough to want to get better? Are you good enough to want to get better, to go beyond all limits? Because that's what separates people who really achieve great things versus mediocre things, and really constantly look at improving and adding value all of the time. Does that make sense? Because leaders listen, and leaders also very, very much care. Leaders connect, we heard it last night, leaders connect the head and the heart. And one of the great things about the business you're in at Mannatech, you're placed in this position of making a living and making a difference with what you do. A great example about care, genuinely care, not just rattling off platitudes about customer service, but genuinely caring. I was speaking at a conference over in Perth a number of years ago, and I arrived with no voice, which is an occupational hazard in my business. And the receptionist went through her standard pattern. This is the pool, this is the golf course, this is the wine list, da-da-da. And I went, "I'm sick, I just want to go to my room." Anyway, I get to my room a little bit later, and there's a knock on the door. "Room service?" I went, "I didn't order room service." And the voice on the other side of the door says, "Yes, Miss Devrye, we know you didn't order room service, but we also know you're not feeling well. Some hot lemon and honey with our compliments." Now, I should have probably been taking some Immunoboost or something like that, but anyway, what's more, there was a handwritten note from the chef that said, "If you'd like anything special for dinner that's not on the menu, like chicken soup, we'd be happy to do that for you." What's more, there was another handwritten note from the concierge that said, "If you'd like us to go into town and get you drugs, legal sort that is, we'd be happy to do that for you." Now, I stay in lovely hotels probably 60, 70 nights of the year. But long after I forget how much marble is in the foyer, what sort of shampoos are in the room, what do I remember? The service. Because that receptionist did not check her brains in when she worked that day. She acted as a champion member of her team, and she passed the customer the baton seamlessly along. And the real estate agents, the next morning, I called her in, and they gave her a standing ovation. And she said, "Shucks, I was just doing my job, you know." And, you know, it was made, but she wasn't just doing her job. She made it the most memorable night I've ever had in a hotel. Well, at least from a customer service perspective. Sorry. I do have a life. Well, I used to have a life. But it was connecting the head and the heart. And isn't that what you're about at Mannatech? Absolutely. And I was in Perth last week. I had 36 hours to fly back from Perth to Sydney via Brisbane, thanks to a particular airline going on strike. And I ended up with bronchitis, and I was very sick. So I haven't been the best had a bit of bronchitis. But last night, I was in the hotel, and I was just speaking to people at the cocktail party, and someone says, "You need Immunoboost," you know. And someone didn't just say, "You need it." Someone actually went up to their room and got me some and brought it down. And Lynn, I'd like to give you a copy of Hot Lemon and Honey. Please give her a big hand. Thank you, Lynn. Because we talk about the head and the heart, but it's also a hand in terms of taking action. And it really, it's genuinely caring. You know, it's not just rattling off the platitudes. It's genuine caring from the heart, but it's also taking the action to do it. So, yeah, thank you very much, Lynn. And in terms of a lot of what I talk about when I'm speaking about customer service, a lot of it's common sense, isn't it? You know? I mean, like that receptionist, you know, she said, "Oh, it's just, you know, putting myself in your shoes if I was sick and a long way from home." You know, just doing and I think back to common sense, common practice. If my parents were alive today, you know, they could probably be experts on customer service. But, you know, sadly they're not. It's amazing how much in the last 30 years or so. But, you know, it's just the little things. Can I get you for a moment to shake out your left hand, please? And put it over your left ear, just in case Mike Tyson's in the room. You heard of the new Mike Tyson computer? 1 megabyte, no memory. Because what I'm going to say now is so important that, unlike me as a little kid, I don't want it going in this ear and out the other. Now you can put your hands down. But if you remember nothing else that I speak about from a customer relations standpoint, I'd ask you to remember this, please. That the very, very best customer relations is not to treat your customers like you treat your relations. In terms of people you think you got to put up with, or people you take for granted until it's too late. Hey, don't even treat your relations like you treat your relations. Tell people you love that you love them, that you care about them. You go, "Oh, this is a bit too touchy-feely." But if you don't genuinely care about the people you live with, you don't genuinely care about the people you work with, how can you talk about customer care, you know? And you're busy being nice to people in the morning, you're being nice to people in the afternoon, you're being nice to people in the evenings. You get home at night, what's the last thing you want to be? Nice! And yet many of you are in family businesses. And the reason I share this is when I won that award, the journalists often said to me, "What's the biggest mistake you've made?" I believe that most mistakes are just opportunities. They're opportunities to improve. They're opportunities to learn and grow forward. Because most mistakes we can learn from and fix. But the only mistake that I've ever made, I've had lots of learning opportunities, but one mistake that I can never rectify is never telling my parents how much I loved them when I had that chance. And that's why I share that with audiences. Never make that mistake. Don't be too proud to tell your parents, your partners, or your kids how much you love them. Because you know what? You're not really in the supplement business. You're in the people business, and it's connecting the head and the heart. And again, I think back to my, I was a little kid, and my mother used to say, Catherine, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That's what that receptionist did, didn't she? That's what Lynn did last night. I'd say, but Dad, I just said such and such. Catherine, it's not what you say, it's the way you say it, And it's just really looking at, did you have some of the same parents I had? But it's amazing. Parents all over the world say the same thing. And when I was a kid, as I said, it went in this ear and out the other. But it really, you've got to believe you're in the business to make a living, a difference. And if you don't honestly believe that in your heart, I put to you, this may not be the right business for you. And, it is just common sense. And, I was in David Jones some time back, and those of you from New Zealand and Singapore, David Jones is our biggest department store. And I happened to be wearing black and white that day, and I'm a little bit short-sighted, and I'm, looking at the board, and an elderly lady came up to me and said, excuse me, where's such and such? I said, I'm sorry, but I don't work here. She said, just as well, you're not very helpful. Duh. Like, you don't care. I felt so bad, I forgot what I went in the store for. But, it is about making a living and making a difference, not just when you're working. And sometimes we all need those little reminders. Now, I know with those wonderful range of Mannatech supplements you've got, that probably all of you are all just bursting at the skin and you have got fantastic energy. But sometimes when I'm traveling a lot on the road, and maybe you're the same, sometimes do you ever feel busy being busy? Or you're tired of being tired? Sometimes it just one too many things weighs you down. And I truly believe that we can't take care of our customers if we don't take care of ourselves. And that's why last night, speaking to many of you at dinner, I was delighted to hear that many of you took the products, and many of you are telling me testimonials about how those products have helped you. But we've got to recharge always. We recharge our laptops, we recharge our mobile phones, but what do we do to recharge ourselves? Do you get recharged coming to a conference like this? Yeah. Absolutely. But what do you do to recharge on a daily basis? And you've got to have something that you can do on a daily basis when you're not surrounded by your peers and this amazing energy in the room. And for me, nature. Nature is what recharges my batteries. For some of you, it might be knitting, it might be art, it might be football, it might be fishing. But for me, it's really being out there in nature. And you know what the number one word to describe people who live to 100? It's not old. It's adaptable. It's the number one word that describes people who live to be 100. It's adaptable. They're people who are still pushing limits, looking forward, looking to the future, not wasting energy looking to the past. Now, I don't know that I'll live to be 100, but I never celebrated my 21st birthday because that was the year my parents passed away. So I decided I wanted to celebrate my 40th in a rather unique way by climbing Mount Kilimanjaro in Africa. And they say that life begins at 40. But as I began training, I thought, yes, life might begin at 40, but everything else begins to wear out, spread out, or fall out. And I'm not your real rugged outdoors person. My idea of roughing it's when room service is late. And the guy I was dating at the time said, but Kath, won't it be great sleeping under the stars? I went, yeah, the 5 stars. But every now and then we've got to step outside our comfort zone, go beyond our limits. So just for a moment, come with me to Africa. And picture yourself standing on top of the highest mountain, Mount Kilimanjaro. It's 20,000 feet high, or 6,000 meters if you're metric, 2.5 times higher than Kosciuszko, twice as high as Mount Fuji. And the sun is bouncing this beautiful pinkish blue light, glaciers, just a freak of nature at the equator. And there's 360-degree views of Africa with Kenya on one side, Tanzania on the other. It's the most beautiful sight I have ever seen. But imagine you're there, it's minus 30 degrees Celsius. You've got a crashing headache and nausea from altitude sickness. I see crosses where people have passed away. But no pain, no gain. And they got us up to make the final ascent in the middle of the night. And they said they did that because of avalanche danger when the sun hit the peaks. But I know the real reason they got us up in the middle of the night. If we'd have seen what we had to do in daylight, we might not have done it. Isn't that the same with some challenges you take on at Mannatech? If you knew how tough it was going to be, you might not have done it. But you're people who love a challenge. You're people who want to reach your summit of success, however you define it in your own heart, even if you never want to climb a mountain. And before we hit the ice, it was brown shale. It was like walking through big, brown, gluggy butter. And it was 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. Hey, isn't it a bit like that in Mannatech as well? Absolutely. And isn't it a bit like that in life? Absolutely. But in my experience, those people who reach their summit of success, however they define it in their own heart, is even those steps back, they keep their eye firmly focused on their goal, where they want to be beyond all limits. And shortly after that climb, I had the great honor of having dinner with Sir Edmund Hillary at his home in New Zealand. It's great to see many New Zealanders here. And Sir Edmund Hillary was the first man on top of Everest. And he was a childhood hero of mine, not just for the first footprint he put on Everest, but what he subsequently did to build 26 schools and hospitals in Nepal. And that's why all the royalties from Hot Lemon and Honey go to the Himalayan Trust to help him continue his work long after his passing. And I was just in awe of this legend. I'm at his home, the same home he built and lived in, and just remained so humble. That was just the most amazing thing. And I'm going, Sir Edmund, and he says, just call me Ed. And I'm going, Ed, did you always know you were going to be the first man on top of Everest? He looked at me and said, Kath, you're still young, you don't understand. He's the only person who calls me young, because he was 88 when he passed away. He said, I had a goal. I wasn't out there just walking around and found myself on Everest. He said, I had a goal, but I didn't know I was going to make it. He said, because what's the point of having a goal if you know you're going to make it? Where's the there? And I thought, that's wise. Do you know what else he said? He said, Kath, it's not the mountain we conquer, it's ourselves. And isn't that wise too? It's not the mountain we conquer, it's ourselves. People often say to me, how did someone my age climb those mountains? 1 step at a time. How do you write 8 books, 1 word at a time? How do you sell your marvelous products? 1 connection, 1 relationship at a time. When you're having those steps back, keep looking at your summit of success where you really want to go beyond all limits. Because there's over 6.9 billion in the world. But when you're on that mountain, it's only you. You have to just take 1 step at a time, 1 step at a time, and know sometimes it'll go backwards, but keep focused on where it is that you really, really wish to be. And I had another birthday last year that had a 0 on the end, so I actually went to Everest Base Camp, beyond Everest Base Camp, to deliver some copies of Hot Lemon and Honey at schools along the way that Sir Edmund Hillary's built. And that's why I think your giving program is good, because you're making a living, you're making a difference, you're giving back to those less fortunate than yourselves. And I'd like to show you a little film clip from that. The sound isn't real great because I didn't have, oh, sorry, that's not Everest at all, is it? No, it isn't. There you go. Do you ever have things, oh yeah, I rehearsed that, and then what happened? Sir Edmund Hillary also went down to the Antarctic, as did I. And our boat got stuck in the ice. You might have heard about it on ABC News. And one of the things I learned a long time ago is to worry about what I can change. Don't worry about what I can't change. Because when my folks died, I was faced with the choice of being a victim from change or a victor from change. And I had to use every amount of energy worrying about what I can do, not what I can't. So when our boat got stuck in the Antarctic, I knew I had to put trust in the captain. And I knew it would only be a matter of time before I could take a different view of the situation. And no, that is not digitized. That's our boat in the foreground, Berg in the back, and luckily the two never met. But I urge you to take a different view of your situation in terms of looking beyond all limits. And this is beyond base camp, this time to the day last year.
"29 years ago, I broke my back in 2 places and was told I'd never play sport again. 11 years ago I had cancer. It's just so wonderful to be here in these majestic mountains. A reminder that every day above the ground is a good one. And every day above the ground with your health is an even better one. It's been wonderful to be here with the Sherpas. It's been wonderful, it's been a tremendous support. It's been wonderful to drop some books along the way at schools that Redmond Hill rebuilt. He's an amazing man. This is an amazing place in the Himalaya.
This is just a little digital camera. But it gives perspective of the magnificence. So we all face Everest. We're not all happy campers. But it isn't the mountain we conquer. It's ourselves. And when every step you take along the way, may all your mountains turn into molehills. Because too often we see these insurmountable things in our way and we go, it's all too big, it's all too hard, I can't do that. Yes, you can. One step at a time. One step at a time. One step at a time, beyond all limits. And I'm willing to bet that some of you might be facing monumental mountains at the moment, metaphorical mountains in your own lives, where you, oh, it's all too big, it's all too hard, I can't do that. You might be facing health challenges, wealth challenges, but again, worry about what you can do and one step at a time. I'd like you to a moment to reflect on some of your metaphorical mountains that you might be facing. I told you the biggest one I faced was when my folks passed away. But I had another chance to turn an obstacle into an opportunity or a stumbling block into a stepping stone when I was working in Japan for IBM. And I ended up very sick in hospital and didn't speak the language, but doctors and nurses all around the world are much the same with their clipboards. And they went, next of kin? I went, hold on, why's that gone backwards? I went, next of kin? I went, I'm supposed to be this big, tough corporate IBM executive. But you know what? I still miss my mom. I miss her hot lemon and honey and Vicks on the chest. And then they went, hereditary diseases. I went, I don't know. I mean, what do you mean you don't know? And it was the first time I'd told anyone that I was adopted, because there was a stigma about being an illegitimate child in the era in which I grew up. And there's no such thing as an illegitimate person. We're all legitimate people, regardless of our circumstances of birth. But I decided then I wanted to find my birth family only for genetic reasons. I was feeling like a hypochondriac. You know what the hypochondriac had on their tombstone? I told you so. To cut a long story short, I'm in conversation with my birth father. It was the night of the closing ceremonies of the 1988 Calgary Winter Olympics. And Calgary was my hometown in Canada. And ever since I was a little girl, I had a dream of being an Olympic athlete. But my parents were European and never encouraged me in my love of sport. My mother was always worried that I was getting injured. I had so many stitches at one stage, she thought she was raising a patchwork quilt. You know, not a daughter. But when I first spoke to my birth father, I learned where I may have had this love of sport. Because the first conversation went something like this. He said, what do you do for a living? I said, I work for IBM. He said, what's that? I went, it's the world's biggest computer company. What do you do for a living? He says, I'm a cowboy. This is 1988. I'm thinking Christopher Skase, Alan Bond. But he wasn't that sort of cowboy. He was a rodeo cowboy. And he wasn't just any old rodeo cowboy. He was 8 times Canadian champion. And had been looking for me ever since I was 6 months old, which kind of explains where I got my love of sport and adventure. It's in my genes. I loved Lee Kernaghan last night. And shortly after that, I went back to see him inducted into the Rodeo Hall of Fame. I thought there'd be a couple hundred people in a cold church hall in Canada. There's 12,000 people packed into the entertainment. And they roll out the red carpet, and they say, and his daughter Catherine's just flown in to surprise him from Australia. Yep, I had been a surprise. And they roll out the red carpet, and my dad walks down the red carpet, and he's all bow-legged, and he's got the big boots on, and the tight jeans, and the big gold and silver belt buckle, and the broad shoulders, and the 10-gallon hat. And he gets up to the microphone, and he talks real slow. I didn't inherit that, you probably gathered. And he said, a lot of you didn't know we had a daughter, Catherine, because that's when she was little. She was too damn ugly to take to rodeo. No matter how old you are, your parents can still embarrass you. But I was proud of him, and he was proud of me, even though we'd come from quite different worlds. And I went from being an only child with no family whatsoever to one of 96 grandchildren and great-grandchildren. I know what they do those cold winter nights in Canada. And I'm sharing a room with one of my half-sisters, and the lights go out. And you know how girls talk when the lights go out. And do you ever get so tired that you just can't sleep, that your mind's just racing like a runaway horse? And I'm lying in that room going, wow, what if I was raised by my father and encouraged in my love of sport? Would I have fulfilled my dream of becoming an Olympic athlete? What if, what if, what if? But as I'm lying in that dark room and the snow is softly falling outside, luckily I came to my senses. And I asked, yeah, Kath, but what if you were born a poor child in Nepal with a life expectancy of 37? What if you were born without legs? What if you weren't born at all? And at that moment in life, I realized life isn't about the what ifs. Life is about the what is. And the what is of my life was I had the best mom and dad in the whole world, and they'll always be my mom and dad. And I know that Sam has adopted 5 children, and I think he's a very special guy, and as is his wife, because the best definition I've ever heard of adoption was from a little 4-year-old girl. And she says, I know what adoption is. She said, adoption is when you move from the tummy of one mummy into the heart of another. But you know what, folks? This story isn't about me. It's about each and every one of us. Because the question I would ask you today are, what are the what-ifs in your life that are stopping you reaching your summit of success? There's no use saying, what if we had, more money? What if we had better IT systems? What if the dollar was different? What if there was no GFC? What if, what if, what if? Leave what-ifs for spreadsheets in terms of looking for the future. Don't waste energy on what-ifs looking back, because again, that old Australian saying, shift happens, but we've got to make sure that we always look at moving forward. And sometimes we've just got to pick ourselves up and get back on the horse, because we're all faced with choices. We're all faced with the choice of being a victim from change or a victor from change. And that choice is entirely ours. I'm very grateful to my birth mother, because she gave me the chance of a lifetime, in a lifetime of chance, in a lifetime of opportunity. And Lee Kernaghan last night, wasn't he great? Absolutely fabulous. But you know what happens if you play a country and western CD backwards? You get back your horse, your car, your woman. But again, not looking backwards, always, always looking forwards to the future.
You'd never make it, but you finally came through. For all of you who made it, this one's made for you. Made for you. This one's made for you. You've made it through, and this one's made for you.
How many times have you been told you'd never make it? But you've gone beyond all limits and you've made it. And that's my story. Really wasn't about me, because it's about every one of us, because I was just an ordinary person that through no choices of my own had extraordinary stuff happen to me on my journey. But it's really important about what you can take away from your journey in terms of going beyond all limits. We're all on a different journey and a different path. I went to Timbuktu a few years ago, And the people there are on a much tougher journey than what we are. And that's why I think your Give for Real program is fantastic, to always give for real on your journey, and again, give from the heart. Because if we follow a path with no obstacles, let's face it, it probably doesn't lead anywhere at all. And a leader is a dealer in hope. You know, I don't know what the future is going to hold. You look at some of the challenges we've had in Australia. You look at the floods. You look at the earthquake in Christchurch. You look at fires. You look at the tsunami. And I mean, it just, again, emphasis of how shift happens. Shift happens in Mother Nature. Shift happens in human nature. And we don't have a magic wand to look to the future and what it might be. But whenever we're having those times that things just aren't going the way we want, and it feels like we've got one too many bricks in our backpack, we should never lose hope. Because we all remember some of the pivotal events in our lives where we were. Do you remember where you were on 9/11? I mean, it's hard to believe we've just had the 10-year anniversary. I was the keynote speaker at the World Airline Conference in Brisbane. 1,600 delegates. The topic, we can't control change. We can only control our attitude towards change. You can imagine the mood in the room. I was at Brisbane Airport on my way home, and my phone went off, and it was a friend to say her mother had passed away of cancer that day. And to her, that was a much bigger tragedy than thousands of strangers on the other side of the world, even though my friend's a very compassionate person. And it made me realize that it's the everyday tragedies in our everyday lives that we have a much tougher job coping with. And I've kept a diary every night since I was 16. So I started writing of inspirational sayings that got me through really tough times. So I started writing a letter to my friend that turned into a book called Hope Happens. And it's not a plug for the book because all the roads go to the Cancer Council. But Hope Happens is the opposite of shift happens. And whether we've lost a loved one, we've lost our health, we've lost our wealth, we should never lose hope. And you as leaders of Mannatech are dealers in hope. Hope and health, and really moving towards the future. Because hope is what happens when you first see a light, just a distant small star in the darkest of night. Hope is what happens when you're poor, but not broken. There's a gold mine of dreams, just not yet awoken. Hope is what happens with the smell of fresh rain when your long drought of dreams is renewed yet again. Hope is what happens long after the pain. Hope is what again and again. I urge you to keep hope always in your heart. Oops, move that back. Can we just cut this in? And right now, can we cut the sound on that, Cam, please? Sorry. And right now, you've all got bookmarks on your chairs. You would have all had a bookmark on your chair. Because I think it's easy to say, yeah, I've heard some of this stuff before. But what I want to be able to do is to make sure you move this stuff forward, because I know this stuff works if you work at it. I'd like you to just get out all your bookmarks, please. And I'm going to ask you in a minute to write down one thing you've got this morning that you can put into action in the next 7 days when you're back in your normal place of abode. I'm going to give you 60 seconds to do it, because just in a minute when the music plays, because I know this stuff works if you work at it. Because I was speaking at the British Removalists Conference, and a guy came up to me afterwards, big burly truck driver. He said, you know, when you started out, I thought that was a load of excrement. He had a much shorter word that started with S. He said, but it made a lot of sense, it did. He said, I'm a very busy man. I don't have a lot of time to think about these things. But you know what you did? He said, I learned one new thing. He said, but a lot of it I'd heard before. But you know what you did? He said, you did this. And he slammed himself on the back of the head. I said, excuse me? He said, you did this, you did. And he slammed himself on the back of the head. I said, excuse me, but like, what is that? He said, I knew a lot of that stuff I did, but you moved it from the back of me to the front of my brain. And I'm sure you know lots of the stuff I've spoken about this morning, but I hope I've moved it to the front of your brain. Can I just tap your heads gently, please? Because if you're having a really bad day and the computer's down and the product hasn't showed up and the car's broken down and, you know, da-da-da, what do? You go, oh, no. And it goes to the back of your brain. So I'm going to give you 60 seconds from now to write down one thing that you can actually put into action. 60 seconds from now. Go. The music, thanks. Excuse me. Okay, how many have got something that they can put into practice? Great. Any questions? Change happens quickly. Change happens quickly. By the way, would anyone like a copy, free copy of Hope Happens? Absolutely no strings attached. Who'd like a free copy? You cannot discover new oceans. You have the courage. Whoa, to the side of the show. Whoa, good on you. Give her a hand. Go down the stairs. It's safer. Oh, whatever you want. Okay. Whoa. Absolutely amazing. Because, you know, you just, because of being a sporting fanatic, you just have to do it. You know, you've got real products and real passion and real possibilities, but you cannot discover new oceans until you have the courage to lose sight of the shore. And the poor person is not one without a dollar, but one without a dream. You're people with big dreams, you're people who can make big dollars, you're people who can help other people on their journeys as well. And it's never too late to reset your dreams, to reset your goals. You know, I mean, I decided that I wanted to reset my dream after meeting my birth father. I wanted to my dream of going to the Olympics. Someone said, so what are you going to go as at your age, a javelin catcher? No, I went with the Australian team to Barcelona. I was working with the most important muscle they've got between here. And I was so excited to be at my first Olympics in Barcelona, but I'm a little bit short-sighted, as I mentioned, and I'm a bit directionally challenged. And I'm coming out of the subway station. I see a little Spanish guy say, excuse me, how do I get to the Olympics? He turned, he looked at me and went, Senora, practice, practice, practice. He could have just as easily said, Senora, attitude, 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 like the guy in the surf shop. It takes practice, it takes attitude, but more than anything else, it takes perseverance to follow your dream. Go beyond all limits. I've been to Atlanta to the Olympics. I've been to Athens. But where do you think the best ones were? Sydney. How proud did you feel to be Australian? And New Zealand as well, when the Olympic torch went by. How many saw the Olympic torch go by? Absolutely. Well, I told you when I arrived in Australia during the middle of grand final season of Australian rules football, my life was at an all-time record low. But on September 15th, 2000, the day of the opening ceremonies of the Sydney 2000 Olympics, my life was at an all-time record high when I was given the honor of carrying the Olympic torch on behalf of my adopted country. And I got to tell you, from the wrong side of the tracks in Canada, it was a tremendous honor. And I'd like to finish with a song by another former Canadian, Celine Dion. And I know some guys don't like Celine, but suspend your beliefs, because the words to this song, The Power of the Dream, are powerful words indeed. Never lose sight of your power. Never lose sight of your dreams. From the time the torch first arrived in Uluru, I was there that day and realized we won't all be leaders like Mandela, but we can all be leaders in our own sphere of influence, as you can at Mannatech, as each and every day you surf those waves of change. We may not be famous sports stars or world champion golfers like Kerry Webb, but every day you can ignite that burning passion for what you do. And that's why on the day of the opening ceremonies, I felt very honored and very humbled to carry the torch on behalf of my adopted country. Because with every step along the way, I knew I was just a small, small part of something so much bigger than myself. I held that torch in my hand, 26 people before Kathy ignited the cauldron. And to this day, I cannot express the emotion that I felt. But I guess that's when I speak of service. I don't just speak of service to customers, but service to our families, service to our communities, service to our country, and yes, service to our planet. Because no matter where we are, like top athletes, we need to give our personal best if we're out there doing what we believe in terms of connecting the head, connecting the heart, connecting the hand, in terms of just doing it, just going beyond all limits. Going beyond all limits with real products, with real passion, and with real possibility. That choice, ladies and gentlemen, is entirely up to you. But I can tell you one thing. I will be barracking for all of you at Mannatech. Thank you, and God bless. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you. You've been a great audience. Thank you. Thank you. Woo! Okay, I'm out of here. Whoa!